Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll try to do a stupid little introduction. We do have to come up with a thing though. But
Yeah,
are
like
you doing that thing where you're hey, what's up, guys? Are you doing that thing where you're already recording and we'll edit it later?
yeah, I've been recording for like 5 minutes.
What's up, guys?
What?
Welcome to the GogertZone podcast, episode 2. Back with you, Ryan Gogerty and your man Connor Calzone. Welcome to Offseason Recap Part 2. Thank you for tuning in. First episode, we went over some offseason recaps. We went over some other things. We trailed off topic and got into some rookies we're excited about and some other coaching changes and whatnot. We got a lot to get through. Basically, what we learned is that the offseason was filled with many topics. So let's get right into it. Well,
I,
how you doing, Connor?
I just have to say, you said we went off topic quite a few times. If you have ADHD, this is an ADHD sponsored podcast. If you
This is an
like
ADHD
not staying
positive
on
podcast.
topic,
Yes.
this you can get that exactly in the Gogurt Zone pod. So,
That is exactly what you're looking for. If you just want to ramble about fantasy football, this is the place to be. Today we got 5 really intriguing offseason moves. We're going to start off with Drake May replacing Mac Jones in the New England locker room. We got Steffon Diggs to the Texans. The Bolstered Bolts with Gus Edwards going to the Chargers. We'll talk about the implications of that and Jim Harbaugh taking over the reins. The Windy City Swift, DeAndre Swift to the Bears. Big impact there. The five-headed monster in Chicago and where that leaves the Eagles now. The Chiefs' new speedsters, Marquise Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. Got a lot to get through today. Really excited to talk about the fantasy implications. Seems like the season is just around the corner and we have so many things to talk about. I'm super excited. Connor, how are we feeling about this episode? What are you most excited to talk about today?
I think I'm most excited to talk about DeAndre Swift to the Bears. Maybe not even necessarily because of the move, but just to talk about the Bears. I mean, this is a team that's been the laughingstock of the NFL. Not the laughingstock. There's a lot of laughingstocks in the NFL, my New York Jets included. But one of the laughingstocks in the NFL for the last few seasons, and all of a sudden it looks like they've ramped up their team to possibly be a playoff contender this season, and an NFC North division that's actually going to be really interesting too.
Yeah, I gotta say, I did not think the NFC North would get this interesting this quick. I didn't see Jordan Love popping out of left field from there. It's going to be very competitive this year. I'm super pumped to see Caleb Williams. If you watched episode 1, you heard that I'm a huge Oklahoma fan, and that's where Caleb Williams got his origins from, where he took over Spencer Rattler and became a Heisman candidate, obviously before going on and winning with Lincoln Riley at USC. Really excited to watch the Bears this year. Good call there. So how about we just hop right into it? Let's get into our first talking point of the day. Mac Jones is out at New England. Obviously, we know Bill Belichick is out. We just got news today that he was actually offered a spot on the 49ers. That is Bill Belichick, and he turned it down. So it's kind of a new system, but we still got a lot of genealogy getting passed down through the Patriots organization. The Patriot way seems to still be alive and well, but we'll see how that goes with the season ahead. So Drake May is at the helm. How hard do you see it's going to be to project the Patriots offense this year if Drake May is the starter week 1, if he starts later on? Is New England's passing game going to be predictable at all? And is it going to be any better than last year?
This is not going to be a team that's good this year. I mean, there's going to be 3 good teams in the AFC East, hopefully. Copium, as a Jets fan. But there's probably going to be 3 good teams in the AFC East and one team that's very bad the other 3 will beat up on, and that's going to be the Patriots, right? White Boy Summer is still in effect in New England. They went from Mac Jones, a unathletic white guy, to Drake May, who's a
Slightly athletic.
slightly more athletic white guy. So they're at least trending in the right direction of where the league is going. But yeah, I mean the Patriots do not have a lot of fantasy studs on their offense. I mean over the last few years, Ramondre Stevenson's had some up and down seasons in New England. I think it was 2022. He had a really good season. 2023, not as much, even though we still did have a few good weeks. And it's just based on touchdowns. I mean, touchdowns are so important in fantasy football, and this team might not be scoring a lot of them. Whether it is Jacoby Brissett or Drake May at the helm, it looks like Jacoby Brissett has the job. It's his job to lose right now in week 1. I think it's pretty obvious that Drake May is going to overtake that at some point in the season, whether it's week 4 or week 8. But I don't think it really matters who is at the helm here. I think Drake May might try to air the ball out a little bit more than Jacoby Brissett does. He's going to make more
Mhm.
mistakes as a rookie. He didn't have too many interceptions in college. I think he only had about 9 interceptions in his final season in college at UNC. But there are some throws that he made, some of the touchdowns he made. If you look at his highlight reel, some of them are terribly thrown balls the wide receiver makes a great grab on, more so than an impressive throw by him. So
Sometimes that's all you need to be a good quarterback.
he's good at escaping the pocket. He's going to make some mistakes, but if you are trying to draft a Patriots guy, or if you have Ramondre Stevenson in Dynasty or something like that, I think you do eventually want Drake May to take the starting spot.
Yeah, so and ADP is saying that right now. So the drafts that have been done so far still only late July, so we still are only expecting hardcore fantasy players and the experts to be doing any sorts of drafts at this time. And they have him as QB 25 in the rankings, the experts at ESPN. And he's expected to get 14.5 fantasy points per game. So definitely the experts are expecting him to take over the reins at some point. I think Jacoby Brissett kind of being an older veteran coming in, clearly had his chance on multiple teams. I think this is more of a wean him into it type of situation, whether that be week one, Drake May takes the helm, or just a couple weeks in. I don't expect him, if Drake May's still sitting on the bench week 6, I think that's kind of, the alarm bells should sound. We might be having to scream Trey Lance 2.0, something along those lines. But so full disclosure to the audience, today we're going to try out our first attempt at including graphics in our podcast, little visuals that include some stats and some things that we can reference to give you a little context on the players here. Is it pulled up on the screen right now? I can't even.
It was just pulled up on the screen. I just put it back to our faces, but they got it for a good 2 minutes, so they got their fair share of Drake
Fantastic.
May's stats.
Oh, they got their fair share of Drake May stats. So yeah, so like Connor said, only 9 interceptions his last year at UNC. Really did shock me how much rushing upside he had. I had to include total yards per game and total touchdowns because in his stats he had about 37 rushing yards a game, which is nothing to scoff at the college level, and I want to say like 9 rushing touchdowns. So 24 of them passing, 9 rushing. So he's definitely a much more athletic quarterback, at least resume wise, than Mac Jones was coming
Mm-hmm.
out of college. Third overall pick, highly touted, obviously a big quarterback class out of the draft. And like we said, the experts are projecting a decent year for him. They think 15 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. It's not a great ratio or anything like that, but he may be someone fantasy relevant to stash on your bench. But the point being, he could be helpful if you're still looking at someone like a Kendrick Bourne, or if the offense is just more competent as a whole instead of having, who was it, Matt Patricia running the offense, the former Lions head coach, defensive coordinator, taking over as an OC a couple years ago. Hopefully, we have a better offense overall, and Patriots can be fantasy relevant once more. We'll see if that continues with the Patriot way.
Yeah, quick shout out to before we end up with the Patriots, Jalen Polk too, rookie wide receiver going to New England could be an interesting piece to stash on a
I
dynasty
did hear about that today.
on a
Yeah.
dynasty bench if you do believe in Drake May in the long term.
Yeah, yeah. The rumors around the locker room, according to the wonderful Liz Loza from ESPN, and we have to give them all the credit we can
Wonderful.
because what Liz Loza has talked about so beautifully by her colleagues at ESPN. I got to say, these graphics might look eerily similar to the one. It's because I took a lot of inspiration from the Fantasy Focus podcast. Please forgive me. We'll make it our own design in the future. But just for our inspiration, we needed, how do we organize these stats on the screen? How do we take pictures? And thankfully we're in the age of AI where we can edit these pictures out and all that. But Liz Loza says that Kendrick Bourne is kind of the sort of standout in camp so far. He seems to be the one that will sort of be the favorite, but that can obviously change. And you were saying Polk, the rookie, there's always a chance for room for someone like that to be someone you stash later on. So Drake May, obviously that's a big one, big rookie pickup, and Mac Jones over having a great time in Jacksonville. We'll see if he proves his value over Trevor Lawrence there. But yeah, it seems like you have something you want
Mac
to say.
Jones was meant to be a backup quarterback. He just he just gives the vibe of a backup quarterback. I could see him being a career backup, start a few games here and there, but just be totally happy riding a 10-year career as a backup quarterback.
And all on Florida teams too.
Yeah,
He's
right.
one of those that just falls in love with the Florida weather. The New England to Florida pipeline is alive and well.
Mac Jones loved taking a
So
picture with his shirt off, so
yeah, he sure friggin' does. Slightly more star-studded conversation next, going on to the Steffon Diggs trade to the Texans. Um, Steffon Diggs traded to the Texans April 3rd. Obviously, he's been a top-tier wide receiver for years and years and years. I was actually kind of surprised when I remembered that he didn't have that amazing of a year last year with the Bills. Obviously, a good year. Finished, I think, I don't know what place he finished, but he's ranked 21 going into this season. He averaged 16.1 points per game last season. Obviously great, but not in that top three conversation. Right now, I want to say he's going as what do we have him in the wide receiver rankings? He's
Uh,
ranked 21,
his
but
ADP is at about 34, so he looks like he's kind of an end of the third round kind of talent, assuming you're talking about a 12-team PPR league.
right, which is shocking for me. So he's 17 out of receivers for projections for the year. So what that's telling me is that he's not getting valued as a wide receiver one going into Houston, even with CJ Stroud, who we're optimistic about being a great pass catcher. Is this just a too many mouths to feed situation? What does this mean for the Texans? Or do we think that Diggs will return back to form? Uh, how do we feel? Do we feel like this is just him getting old?
So there's interesting, like, there's two sections of my brain that I'm wrestling with over here, right? The good side is this is Stefon Diggs. He's proven in Minnesota and Buffalo over the last almost decade that he is an elite wide receiver. And even
Mhm,
just the first half of last season, he was outstanding. I don't have the exact stats pulled up, but I'm pretty sure he averaged
mhm,
about 20 or 22 points per game for the first half of the season. And that
mhm.
second half of the season, he just fell off a cliff. He got all moody. He became a diva in Buffalo. He was
Yeah,
complaining about not getting his catches, not getting his touches. It seems
yeah.
like I watched a press conference of him in Houston a few days ago, and he seems very optimistic. He seems very humble. And CJ Stroud came out saying that he's got good rapport with Stefon Diggs already.
Mhm.
So, assuming Stefon Diggs isn't going to be a little diva, he can be a very valuable piece in this Houston offense. But like you said, there is a kind of conversation about is this too many mouths to feed? You got Nico Collins, you
Yeah.
got Tank Dell coming back from his injury, and you have Stephon Diggs. Those are three guys that could, in theory, be the wide receiver one on this team. Personally, I like Nico Collins more as the top guy on the Texans. If Diggs
Really?
is comfortable being a wide receiver two on this team, he will have a great fantasy season. But if he starts complaining
Yeah,
about his
I
touches,
don't think he's going to be happy with that. Yeah. Yeah, he strikes me as someone that's not going to be happy taking a wide receiver two role. But also, the projections this year have him going for 100 yards less, almost 20 receptions less, two touchdowns less. I'm having a hard time visualizing that. Obviously, the Bills are a high-powered offense. He has Josh Allen at quarterback, but he's one of those guys that's just such a stable floor. I think that's the key here. He's one of those reliable floor receivers going into this year. If you can catch him in the second round, absolutely do that. I mean, he's one of those guys that 100% can be a wide receiver one, first round wide receiver by the end of the season. But one of those things where I think he's not going to do you worse than a third round pick. I think these projections are a pretty solid. I think his curve is a little bit lower on his potential outcomes. I think it's going to be mostly around what it's projected at, if not higher. I have a hard time believing he'll do worse than his projections.
yeah, I'm. To be honest, I just had the Stephon Diggs graphic for the last 4 minutes on the screen, so sorry you didn't get to see our beautiful faces. I'm getting new to this, trying to. I'm looking at stats. I'm switching between the scenes on OBS. But it's
Welcome to
interesting you
episode
say,
two.
yeah, right. It's interesting you say you think he's a second round talent, and if you like no worse than a third round talent, that seems a little bit extreme of a take to say because last year, second half of the season, he was nowhere near second round, third round, fourth round wide receiver, and he was the only guy in Buffalo. He's going to have targets to share in Houston. And it's not like he had a bad quarterback or anything either. I mean, he had Josh Allen slinging the ball to him. I
Yeah.
definitely don't like him in the second round. I think he is about at the right ADP, like that 32, 34 range, end of the third round. I'm comfortable taking him there, but I'm definitely not reaching for him. And one
I
question to
don't.
get to before we go to the next topic is I
Uh-huh.
noticed Stephon Diggs on ESPN's live draft rankings right now ranked 32, Nico
Right.
Collins ranked 35. Which one of those two
Right.
are you picking up first?
I'm picking Diggs first. I have a hard time trusting Collins with just the just with the resume. I think just Diggs has proven that he could do it with so many different quarterbacks. It's not so many different quarterbacks, but he's done it with different quarterbacks. He's proven that he's a diva, but he'll still produce. And I think you could argue last year a lot of it had to do with that diva status, even if he is a diva at heart, let's say. Uh, I still think there's something about year one in a new system. You have something to prove. While Nico Collins is a great talent, Diggs has been doing this for so long. I just have a hard time believing it. And I'm looking at names like Devon Achan. I think he's like one of those guys, massive upside, insane efficiency, but those like seven touches that were 200 yards and three touchdowns last year, like that could easily slip away and he's irrelevant. And you have James Cook. I can't imagine taking James Cook over Stephon Diggs. Michael
No.
Pittman Jr., great player. Do we really trust him with Anthony Richardson to be one of these receiving stuff? Like I actually liked him better with Gardner Minshew last year, and even if it was Gardner Minshew, I still wouldn't trust him. Pittman at 27 versus Diggs at 32 right now. So I think as more drafts happen, he'll creep up towards the second round. But I would have absolutely no problem if I was forced to take him in the second round. That's pretty much what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Off topic, we're not going to go with this right now, but I also know some Joe Mixon's at 26. Kind of crazy how many guys in the Houston offense are up at the top of the live draft trends, but that's, I think, a topic for another episode. Let's not get too
It
far
will
down
be
that road.
interesting. It will be interesting to see Joe Mixon if he could keep doing it because his efficiency dipped, but he still was one of those really reliable RB2s last year. It'll be fun to see. It's nice to have the Texans finally be relevant again. You know that
Right.
slump after Deshaun Watson decided to take some personal time off. The Texans were hard to watch, and we finally have some entertaining Texan football to watch. And C.J. Stroud, one of the most fun guys to root for coming out of last year's draft. So, yeah, super pumped
I,
about
I,
that.
I
And
would say he's slightly more fun to root for than Deshaun Watson.
I hate watching Deshaun Watson these days. For the sake of football, I hope he's good.
There's a lot of
But
people who don't
really,
like seeing Deshaun Watson either.
yeah, no, well, yeah, that's a good point. But on a more serious note, like I think I would like to see the Browns get stuck to them. I'd like to see them suffer for trading Baker Mayfield. And I used to root for them. I have a Browns Baker jersey in my closet upstairs. I think that's if the Deshaun thing can truly bite them in the butt one more time, us Giants fans would have one last ditch hope at not having the worst quarterback deal in the league right now, and that's what we're rooting for this year as Giants fans is to not have the worst quarterback deal in the
Let's
league.
let's
So
keep a tracker if Ryan can mention Baker Mayfield in every single episode of this podcast.
the odds are probably yes. I probably can find a way to mention him every podcast, and if you like and subscribe, maybe we'll show him we're such big fans that we'll get him on the podcast. That's obviously a far stretch, but
Zero subscribers.
just zero subscribers. We're gonna pull up this clip 10 years from now when Baker's announcing for Fox and we actually get him to come on our podcast. That's all gonna be great. So on to the next topic. We're gonna work on the transitions as the episodes move on.
Right.
I feel like you have a lot more stake in this than I do. I've never had a piece of Gus Edwards before. I might have had him on a team a couple years back when he was like RB3 for the Ravens. But this whole Charger situation is mind blowing. Their whole team has just been completely revamped. I saw Gerald Everett got traded to the Bears. I completely forgot about that. So it's not just Keenan Allen,
Mike
Mike Williams,
Williams.
and obviously Austin Eckler that are gone now. It's also Gerald Everett. Like you said, I think on episode 1, how many of their receptions from last year are gone? Like
380 vacated targets from last
an
season.
insane number. So even though I think we trust Justin Herbert is a strong talent, it's a completely new offense. Jim Harbaugh, we think is probably going to be a run heavy off. I mean, it's tough to say. Like he's got such a good quarterback on his hands. How do we see this Gus Edwards trade playing out?
So Gus Edwards is interesting to me because he's a guy who I sneakily didn't realize he's actually going to turn 29 this season. Does not
Sneaky
feel
old,
like
yeah.
he is that old. And yes, he had those career highs last season after J.K. Dobbins got injured, but also his efficiency numbers were not good, right? And maybe Jim Harbaugh, he is a very pound the rock kind of guy, maybe less focused on efficiency, more just focused on grinding out first downs. And Gus Edwards is a great back for that, right? He's a great workhorse back, but he's not going to give you that level of explosiveness that if he can return from his injury, J.K. Dobbins can bring. That's something that's not getting talked about enough in this Charger situation. They actually they brought the whole Ravens running back room to Los Angeles. J.K. Dobbins, even though it's a much smaller contract and it's only I think $50,000 guaranteed. I got more bands than J.K. Dobbins has guaranteed this year, but not a guaranteed contract. But J.K. Dobbins is on the team and he had that great first half of that game in 2023 before tearing his Achilles, I believe it was. He had another knee injury, I think, in 2021, and it's hard to come back from 2 knee injuries as a running back, but he is the more explosive guy than Gus Edwards.
He definitely is, and currently going as running back 42, ADP 138 for J.K. Dobbins. So actually not much farther down than Gus Edwards. So the fantasy community seems to be kind of split. I think the reason people are treating Gus Edwards with so much more respect is we remember him getting in the end zone last year. He scored 13 touchdowns last year, even only averaging 4 yards a carry, which isn't bad, but it's not one of those elite running type statistics. He scored 13 touchdowns, 11 fantasy points per game. We can't expect that if he's not going to score those same number of touchdowns. ESPN has it projected at 7 touchdowns this year, just a slight decrease in carries and touchdowns. I have a hard time playing this one out. I mean, I want to believe it's going to be Gus Edwards. The issue is if J.K. Dobbins somehow can stay healthy, he might just be so good that he takes it all over. I mean, I know some people like to do a dart throw on Dobbins. Just seems like people have been playing darts for about 4 years now, and it hasn't worked out yet.
He
But
had that
but if,
great first half of 2023. It was looking like it was all going to work out, and then he tore his ACL or Achilles or whatever it
but
was.
if you can remember J.K. Dobbins in his prime, it is one of those backs to get excited about. So it'd be interesting seeing the Chargers going forward, see if they do a two-headed approach, what Jim Harbaugh does going forward. But these Chargers are going to be fun to watch. I think that's the one thing. Yeah, the AFC West was it the West or the
West.
South? What AFC West has given us is an exciting matchup.
If I'm a fantasy owner, I honestly have to say my drafting strategy picking Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins, it's probably neither of them. I think that
Not
like
going to
yeah,
do a dart throw later on.
they're gonna be a run heavy offense. You know, Jim Harbaugh, Joe Alt is their first round pick, right? They're gonna definitely run towards
Right.
that scheme. But I just don't know if I can trust. I think that there's a scenario where J.K. Dobbins is a first down, second down back. Gus Edwards is a third down goal line back, and they just neither of them gets enough work in a Chargers team that is again going to rely on Justin Herbert a lot more than these running backs to score
Will the
touchdowns.
offense be as good as we hope it will be? Because if they
It
are,
probably won't be. I don't know how good you're hoping it's going to be.
maybe not, but who's going to score those touchdowns? It's going to be those running backs. And
Lad
honestly,
McConkey.
Glad McConkey, just like we talked
Out
about
of
in F1.
Georgia.
But those Joe Alt memes were hilarious. They were like, oh, yeah, 7 foot tall white guy wearing no brand quarter zip on draft day, hugging his girlfriend and his mom. No, didn't hug his girlfriend, just hugged his mom.
he,
This
he
man
he
looks
legitimately might be an NPC. I mean,
they're like he's probably going to be the best tackle that has come out the last 10 years, son of a former NFL player. So never know, you maybe just run behind him the whole year, and maybe we'll see. But we'll have to see how it plays out. Nonetheless, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the Chargers, not expecting them to do anything against the Chiefs or anything like that, but will be a fun team to watch this year nonetheless.
a running back that I might be more excited about is DeAndre Swift on the Chicago Bears. He just had that last season on the Philadelphia Eagles, eclipsed 1,000 yards in 2023 with the Philadelphia Eagles. Is I don't think many
Yep.
people were expecting this kind of season out of DeAndre Swift last year, and he got it conveyed into a 3-year, $24 million deal, $8 million a year. That's a pretty hefty contract for a running back that's maybe not proven that he's an elite guy year over year. I mean, obviously he had some great seasons on the Lions. He had a good season in Philly, so maybe he is an elite running back. What do you think about DeAndre Swift? Are you looking to draft him? And do you think he can be fantasy relevant on this very loaded Bears offense now?
Holy smokes. Yes, I loved DeAndre Swift last year. I could pull up the spreadsheets. I had him so much higher than everyone else. I'm not someone who really does the told you so. I know that's not coming off great considering I had a whole told you so bit about Baker Mayfield on episode 1.
Yeah, you're
But
2 for 2
DeAndre
right
Swift,
now.
but I'm 2 for 2 so far. But I got to say, DeAndre Swift was one of the few bets. And let me preface, I also had a big bet on Dalvin Cook, thinking that he was going to be some stud for the Jets. Wow, was I wrong? My bad. My bad, guys. So I'm not always right. But I did have DeAndre Swift way higher than most people. I remember watching him on the lines and just thinking this is one of those guys that is just so talented. And if he's given the ball anywhere close to as much as Miles Sanders was the year before, I thought he would do more with it. Also, I thought he'd be involved in the passing game. I was kind of right for the wrong reasons. He was used so much more in the running game than he was in the passing game last year. I was expecting him to be one of those versatile backs. I remember watching him on the Lions having all these great catches and run after the catches. And then he comes to the Eagles and he's just like rushing for 100 yards a game doing nutty things. So averaged 12.5 points per game last year. And that's after a major dip off at the end of the season when the Eagles sort of started to get a little bit worse. I imagine he's going to be Caleb Williams' best friend this year. He's going to be one of those guys that Caleb Williams is going to love dumping it off to. He's going to really just love having kind of coming into a veteran type running back, calling the shots, blocking schemes, and things like that. And 3 years, $24 million. It shows you what the Bears thought of him. $8 million a year
They
for
believe in
three
him.
years, nothing to scoff at. I think he's super talented, and if he gets used in the passing game any more than he did last year, I think he's got some good upside. Not RB1 upside, but I think he could be one of those guys that is a top tier running back that everyone really enjoys watching this year for
I
sure.
have to say, at his ADP right now, his ADP is 71.2 as of the time making this episode. That definitely seems worth it in my book. An end of the sixth round guy. It looks like he could be an RB2 level guy. I mean, I think that's worth it. I
Right.
think drafting your second running back in the sixth round is great value if you're looking at your fantasy football team. I think that he definitely has the skills to even outperform that if the Chicago Bears can get into the red zone and the end zone a lot this year. Obviously, they haven't done that too much in the previous years, and it's not like they have crazy competition in the backfield. There's Roshan Johnson there, Khalil Herbert there. Neither of those guys huge receiving threats, so maybe they use DeAndre Swift in the passing game some more this season. And yeah, he could. I think he can definitely outperform his ADP.
Yeah, and not to mention, I think we can kind of both predict. I mean, obviously, Jalen Hurts was a big time MVP candidate 2 years ago, but I would confidently say Caleb Williams is going to be a better passer than Jalen Hurts. I think, he seems to be one of the top prospects in recent memory,
Year
but just
one though,
pure arm talent. And it might not be that he's this amazing stud of a passer. Like, we can't expect a CJ Stroud season, even though he is this great prospect. But I think we can expect him to make use of his running back and dump offs and short passing situations. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just looking at this. I'm like, Ramondre Stevenson's above him. Aaron Jones for the Vikings. Like, I
mm-hmm.
don't trust these guys more than I trust DeAndre Swift this year.
Aaron Jones, no way. I mean,
But
DeAndre Swift, I
I
would
love on Aaron Jones, but yeah, then we got
in a
Kenneth
Vikings
Walker for
offense that
Seattle.
might have Sam Darnold as the quarterback, when you have Caleb Williams and a very competent offense around him with playmakers, you got to trust DeAndre Swift over Aaron Jones.
Right. So I feel very good about this. Really excited to watch the Bears. I think this is kind of the year of the boring teams finally being
No
entertaining.
Bears.
So we're not just going to be watching Red Zone for like 2 games anymore. We're finally going to have some mutual interest and maybe a competitive playoffs for once. Who knows?
Yeah, a
We'll see.
competitive
We'll just be
with the Bears, a competitive NFC North. I mean, you got the Packers who are looking good. You got the Lions looking good. You got the Bears looking good. Even the Vikings, if
yeah. And
JJ
you know what?
McCarthy takes the spot and
We'll see
ends
about
up being
Vikings.
decent,
Our boy Matty
maybe
G. We know our boy Matty G is a big time Vikings fan. I feel so bad for the guy because as a Giants fan, the
you
worst
feel
win
bad
we
for
ever had
him.
as the worst win we ever had as an organization was beating the Vikings in the wild card round as the Giants because that forced us to sign Daniel Jones and franchise tag Saquon Barkley. It fucking stabs me in the heart. I'm like,
What
why did we have to win that game?
that was that season the Vikings went like
But
13
the
and 4,
Vikings went
right? Like they went like
off.
10 and 1 in close
They were
games.
doing
They're just
amazing,
such a
and
fluke team.
Kirk Cousins was on that Netflix documentary Quarterback. Highly recommend watching. That was an amazing behind the scenes season on that. But the really like downfall last year with Kirk Cousins getting hurt, and it looks like it's not getting any better. I don't trust JJ McCarthy. I hope he proves me wrong. I think the Vikings have a very disappointing season ahead of them, where this kind of 360 flip from where they were 2 years ago is just going to be. Honestly, I have a feeling the Vikings are going to be watching a lot of games from their couch come December, like us Giants fans will. So that's my take on the NFC North. I think a lot of other exciting teams to look out for. Obviously, we're going to be rooting for Justin Jefferson, but yeah, DeAndre Swift overall, my go-to fantasy player from the Bears this year. Really excited to watch that.
All right. So let's get into our second to last topic right here, and that is the Chiefs' new offseason additions. Right now, you'll see in our graphic, we have Marquise Brown here. Maybe we give a little shout out to Xavier Worthy in this as well as another Speedster addition to the Kansas City Chiefs. But what do
Yeah,
you think about
yeah.
these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers? Obviously, Kelsey is getting a little bit older. Rasheed Rice is in some questionable legal situations right now. And then you have Isaiah Pacheco, Marquise
Which,
Brown,
no
Xavier
worries.
Worthy, rounding out the
I think
rest of the Kansas City Chiefs weapons there. What do you trust on the Kansas City offense going into next season?
first off, I trust in. I don't want to take our Lord's name in vain, so let's see if I can. Our Patrick and Savior, Mr. Mahomes. I don't know. However, you would say that, like basically
Lord Kermit.
the second coming of Michael Jordan in American sports, Patrick Mahomes. I trust him with everything. I think that it doesn't really matter who he throws to, the Chiefs are going to have an amazing passing offense. I think last year was a stark drop off. I don't know if you saw, Mahomes said he didn't have fun last year with how bad the offense did. That tells me that
And
he's
they
got a
won
little
a
extra
Super
fun.
Bowl.
And they won a freaking Super
They
Bowl.
won a Super
He was
Bowl.
not having fun having the offense being the issue last year. So my guess is that he's working his tail off. I heard Rasheed Rice, the suspension they're expecting is maybe a 4 to 6 week type situation. We'll see as it comes up, but it's not even going to be a half year from what I've heard so far. I think that the Marquise Brown Xavier Worthy situation is an attempt to find their next Tyreek Hill. I think it doesn't matter. You don't need to fill Tyreek Hill's shoes. They proved that by winning the last two Super Bowls. But they'll get someone that can clearly be a speedster that they have to consider over the top. And then just like they did back in Mahomes' first year when they had all those speedsters, the other guy could be a big jet sweep guy. Like Hollywood Brown's done a lot of that. And he was also one of those Oklahoma guys that played with Baker. So I've watched him for a long, long time. These are two guys that can take sweeps wide. They can run downfield, but they're also good route runners. And one thing that we should really include in this podcast is these clips that they're having come out of camp. Mahomes rolling left, doing his typical flip the feet and chuck it 60 yards downfield, and Worthy making these great catches on the deep ball. He's a small guy. He's not one of those guys that's going to get vertical and beat you on a jump ball, but maybe he could be like Tyreek where he just beats you deep and then he just gets off the ground first, and maybe he's got some insane hops where he can just make all these catches. I'm really excited to see both of them. I don't really buy the Kelsey old argument. I think he's just going to be one of those Statue of Liberties that's just going to be taller and more in sync with Mahomes, and he's just going to keep catching the ball until he decides to retire. So I actually expect Kelsey to have a better year than he did last year, but I also expect both of these receivers to be relevant. Who's to say if it's going to be Brown or Worthy? I'm really excited to watch them both, though, and I think they'll both be fantasy relevant. They say right here, Brown in our graphic, if we had it today, 11.7 projected points per game. I will take that any day of the week out of him. I wouldn't expect Worthy to be very far behind. We'll just have to see how they get him involved. But yeah.
It's the thing is, can either of these guys, Xavier Worthy or Marquise Brown, be a guy that you can be confident putting in your lineup every single week? That's going to be the question. Marquise Brown is a flex option as a spot starter on my fantasy team. I love it, right? There's plenty of times where he could, pop off for a 20-point game if he gets in the end zone or gets a few large 20, 30-yard receptions, especially, Xavier Worthy too. He's going to have a lot of those receptions where he just gets a deep one down the field, like Rashid Shaheed on the Saints, or when Scotty Miller used to play on the Buccaneers, right? I'm thinking it's those guys that just going to run as far as they can, and if he happens to be open, he's going to get a huge reception out of it, right? Xavier
Yeah,
Worthy in the
yeah.
jet sweep, too. That's an interesting thing that you pointed out, too. Xavier Worthy going in on a jet sweep while you got everyone else running up could be very interesting.
Mhm.
He's very freaking fast.
Yeah,
But,
well, actually, as an Oklahoma fan, I keep bringing it up. He was torching us from Texas for.
mhm.
It's just insane. This guy is lightning quick. It's nuts.
So Marquise Brown, I did get the graphic up. Look at that on the fly tech support right there.
Huh, on the fly.
Right. His ADP right now is 105.9. He's ranked as wide receiver 42.
I know he's
And
going really late in drafts.
he is ahead of Xavier Worthy as well. I mean, Rasheed Rice is
Hmm.
going, I think, in the 60s or 70s just because of the uncertainty of his suspension. But you have to think that the Chiefs are going to have two top 50 wide receivers, right? So you got to think Marquise Brown's going to live up to that ADP.
And I think what's going to happen, I don't know as much about Worthy's hands as I do about his speed and his deep threat ability. Marquise Brown has reliable hands. It's one of the things that they were missing last year. Obviously, Rasheed Rice kind of emerged as the number one receiver. He's going to be out the first couple weeks. I think Marquise Brown is going to be one of those guys that shocks everyone with his hands. And Mahomes is just going to get very comfortable getting back to throwing his 10-yard outs and the reliable hands. Comeback routes or something that Marquise Brown's really good at. I think that he's going to be a target monster. And I think there's going to be so many targets to go around because we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. I
Right.
just think that they're going to be one of the most explosive offenses again because why wouldn't they be? It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid. They had a down year and they won the Super Bowl. Like I really have to believe that Brown's going to do better than his ADP going as wide receiver 42 right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just throw Kelsey on one side and Hollywood Brown on the other side, put them both on different 10 to 15-yard routes. I mean, it's going to be hard
Let
to
him
stop all
fly.
that, especially when you have Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball, the most accurate quarterback since Jesus Christ. Sorry to say the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah, yeah. Hold on now. This is a family-friendly
Yeah, right.
podcast.
Like that meme where it's like it's two pictures and it's like this is the same image. It's just Patrick
Yeah,
Mahomes
yeah.
and Jesus Christ.
See that'd be some tech savvy on the fly stuff. If you could have an API that pulls a picture of Pat Mahomes and Jesus Christ next to each other live mid podcast. Yeah, I'm scrolling down this ADP list. I can't even find Brown. I mean, he's so far down, and I mean, I guess I just probably just scrolled over him. But point being, exactly that. I'm excited to see. I'm very happy taking him as a late round flyer. Worthy, I'm sure, is going to be one of those exciting keeper picks just because he's a rookie. But
Mhm.
but overall, Chiefs offense, I expect to be back and better than ever. Isaiah Pacheco as well. Overall, a lot of good stuff come from the AFC West, like we talked about. Just getting really excited for the football season ahead.
Yeah. So that was all the topics that we had for this episode, but we do have our first viewer question from my friend Colton Mendez. He
Viewer
says,
question.
longtime listener of one episode and first time asker. With Brandon Ayuk's trade demand shaking up the immediate plans for San Francisco's future, I've been tempted to move him in my dynasty league. However, when he reported at training camps this week, I inhaled the copium my receiver core staying intact, and I'm thinking about keeping him. Smart minds are telling me to float the market, but I'm unsure of what sort of path to take. So,
Well, oh yeah.
what are we
So
thinking in
what do
a
we
dynasty
what
league?
do we think? I I really like it. Here's the reason. First off, I think he had the besides George Pickens, I think he was either the second or third highest yards per reception last year. He is one of those guys that was just an absolute monster downfield when he got the ball thrown his way. He would just have these monster fantasy games. I think he's capable of everything else. I think just in the Niners offense, that wasn't necessarily his role. I could tell you as someone who played high school football, motivation really does matter. It does matter, and I think what's going to happen is Aiyuk knows that he's playing for his next contract, and I think you see that all over the league. People playing in their contract years, they just do really well for some reason. Like my beloved Daniel Jones, who I love so much. They just seem to perform in their contract year, and it's
Copium.
because they take their training in the offseason more seriously. They take camp more seriously because they want to have their best year yet for when they come into negotiations in the offseason. He wants to go to a good situation next year where he gets paid the right amount of money. I think he's going to end up going back to the Niners. That's what the GM made it sound like, John Lynch. I think that he's going to go back. He's going to have a great season with the Niners, maybe even better than last year. We'll see. But I think he's going to be solid. And then wherever he goes next year, I'm sure he's going to be just as good. He's one of those super talented guys. He seems to be okay at staying healthy, but just a freak athlete. I have no problem keeping him, and I'm looking forward to watching him again.
Yeah, so like you said, you said a stat that I wasn't exactly, it's not the exact same stat that I have. I do have that he was third in routes in the yards per route run last season. He's definitely a deep ball kind of guy.
Yeah.
The thing that worries me about Brandon Ayuk though is you know that he was 38th in the league last year in total targets. He only had 105 targets last season and 75 receptions, which is slightly concerning on a San Francisco offense that has also a lot of mouths to feed. Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk,
Right.
and that is George Kittle as well. And this is with, Brock Purdy, who's a solid quarterback, great game manager quarterback, right? But it's not a guy who's going to be throwing the ball 50 times a game, 400 yards a game, 5 touchdowns a game every single game, right?
Who's to say? Who's to say though? He's
Me.
maybe he has a little junior year progression. Maybe he does start throwing for 400 yards a
Right,
game. Who
Mr.
knows?
Mr. Irrelevant might just start becoming the best quarterback of all time. No hate to Brock Purdy. He's a fine quarterback. But I don't think I am a huge fan of Brandon Ayuk, especially with these trade talks, with these contract negotiations. The thing is, they've offered him, it seems like not even close to the amount of money he wants. And while that's been going on, they've gotten Christian McCaffrey on a new deal, they've gotten
Uh,
Debo Samuel on a new deal, and he's just standing there like, where's my new deal? Right? It
mm,
might become for the people who are basketball fans the Paul George situation where he just kept getting offended and offended by the trade offers that eventually it just like he was like offended. He's like I don't even want to
it's
continue negotiating with you
disrespectful.
and I'm going on to my next team next season. So
You know what?
I don't
That's
think
fair.
Brandon Ayuk is going to be a San Francisco 49er next season. I don't know if he gets traded during this season or if he leaves as a free agent after this offseason. But regardless of where he is, in San Francisco, I'm not sure I like him. I don't think that he's going to be a top 10, top 15 wide receiver, which is what I think you're drafting him for. I definitely don't think he's a wide receiver one with the situation in San Francisco. And if there's someone who's just kind of trading for him based on name value, trading for him based on the few good seasons that he's had, I would definitely float the market on Brandon Ayuk.
I mean, if you can get someone to pay above value, that's great. I mean, right now his ADP is 43.1, so he's going as 41 on average in the ESPN drafts right now. That seems about right to me. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. For this year, if he performs as well as he did last year, I'm absolutely fine with where he's going. But also, because there's so many mouths to feed, he wasn't getting that many targets, and that's part of the reason I think it makes a good case for him to stay or to keep him on your team is because going into next year, if he does become a high like a higher target share on whatever team he goes to, if it's a half decent situation, he might all of a sudden get a 10-20% uptick in targets, be the main guy. And who's to say? Maybe maybe they start scheming him in a little bit differently with the Niners this year and stop using him as strictly a deep threat. But the Shanahans seem to have their offenses figured out, so I don't know why we believe that they change anything right now. But
What
I'm happy with
you're
where
saying
he's
the
going.
washed up old ex high school player doesn't know a coaching scheme better than Kyle Shanahan? That's
Yeah,
crazy.
actually, I think Kyle Shanahan's kind of washed out. I don't think he really knows what he's talking about. I think he should really listen to me and the Delaware Wing T playbook that I used to run in high school. Uh, but on a more serious note, I'm seeing here he's going two spots above Debo Samuel right now. So Debo Samuel is going 43, and Brandon Ayuk's going number 41. People forget Debo Samuel was the number one wide receiver in fantasy for a long stretch a couple years ago. Like he's one of those really high upside guys. Obviously, I think that got impacted with Christian McCaffrey coming on board. That versatility of using him as a bench, essentially a second running back, kind of went away. But the 49ers, of course, will be a fantasy friendly, fun team to watch as they have been the last couple years. Really looking forward to watching them. And honestly, I would not be upset with a San Francisco Kansas City rematch in the Super Bowl. I thought that was a blast, a really good game to watch. And I'm rooting the heck out of my socks. That's a new
Yeah,
saying for you there.
rooting the
For
heck out of my socks.
I'm rooting the heck out of my socks for Brock Purdy going to this year. Very fantasy relevant, fun team to watch. So,
As much as I
how
like
do we
seeing
feel?
Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, I would like to see some new blood in there. I think that
I would have
we've
no problem
gotten
with that.
enough.
Seeing Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen get their crack at it, I think would be very entertaining. But one of those things where, like, if we get to see a three-peat, we get to brag to our kids, like this is like the Michael Jordan kind of era. We get to see him live. One of those types of things. I think a three-peat would be sick. It would also mean he's on a faster pace than Tom Brady
Oh
on as far
gosh,
as Super Bowls per year
I've
go.
seen enough of Tom Brady as a Jets fan, dude. He's beaten our ass. He beat our ass for 20 years. Okay.
Yeah, yes, he did. Yes, he absolutely did. So, how do we feel? Do we want to wrap it up after that, or do we want to continue our conversation we had last on I think it was Tuesday, no, it was Monday. We wrapped up on talking about the first two rounds and our kind of our initial reactions to the average draft trends for those first two rounds. You want to maybe take a quick peek at the third round?
I think that this is a good spot to end it, to be honest. We're at about 40,
Okay.
45 minutes here. I think that that's kind of the pace that we're trying to keep for these podcasts. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
keeps it
yeah.
digestible and everything. So I think what makes sense is, and let me know if you guys think this is a good idea, viewers, I'm talking to you in the camera. Um,
Yep.
we're thinking about maybe just doing an episode by positional group, right? We're just thinking about doing the quarterback episode, the running back episode, the wide receiver episode, and the tight end episode, and just kind of going over the order that these guys are getting drafted and around where they're going in live drafts as of the time that we're making these episodes, and kind of giving you our insights about which guys are overvalued, which guys are undervalued, some good sleepers to get in the later rounds, etc., etc.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. So yeah, leave your comments, you hundreds of thousands of viewers, and we will do our best to sift through them all and try to implement some feedback from the top liked comments before our next episode. So, if you actually did somehow tune into this episode, thank you for watching. Our goal is to keep improving little by little and provide you the most fantasy relevant content so that you could be the best fantasy player and destroy your friends by the time the season rolls around. So thank you for tuning into episode 2 of the GogertZone podcast. Connor, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you, as always.
Always is a pleasure, Ryan.
Till the next one, peace out. I don't know. We're going to have to figure
Yeah,
that one
outro TBD.
out. Outro TBD.